Good evening, everyone. As President of Asami India, I welcome you all for this grand round. This is our first grand round. We will be having grand round every month, and all the state chapters will conduct these grand rounds one after another, one by one. And our opening batsman today is Bihar and Jharkhand. And I congratulate Dr. Ritesh. He is the state representative for organizing this grand round and getting such a star-studded faculty for today. So I welcome the entire faculty. I welcome Dr. John Mukhopadhyay, Dr. Ian Gupta, Dr. Ritesh Runu, then Dr. Vasudevan, Dr. Altaf, he will be joining soon. And of course, our Shamsul Hoda, he's our joint secretary, and Ritesh Pandey himself. So I welcome you all. And,
Mangal, yeah.
And of course, I cannot forget Dr. Mangal. Welcome, Dr. Mangal. So actually, case-based discussion is the best way of learning. So in the grand rounds, we will be having case-based discussion. The faculty will present cases and you can ask, even the audience can ask questions. If we don't have time, we can have some time after all the cases are showed. So you can ask your questions, your doubts, so that all of us can learn to great extent. So without wasting time, I'll hand over to Ravi. Ravi, you can start the meeting.
Yeah, ma'am.
Ravi,
thank you, ma'am.
please go ahead.
I am really thankful for all the faculty and President Dr. Ruta who has given such a nice vision for starting this grand round. So without wasting time, I request Dr. Ritesh to continue with the first case presentation and inviting our faculty for further discussion. Dr. Ritesh, please.
Yes, thank you, sir. And on behalf of Bihar and Jharkhand, I welcome everyone here. And I invite Dr. P.N. Gupta, sir, for the first case. He is a professor of orthopedics at GMC Chandigarh. He is a reputed pediatric orthopedic surgeon and a faculty of Asami, India. So, sir, please.
Okay. So is my screen visible to everybody?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
Okay. So I start with the case. This is a 7-year-old boy presented 1.5 years after the injury to his right ankle. He actually sustained this injury while playing, and that was treated at a local hospital by a plaster cast. The injury was thought to be trivial, but subsequently patient had pain and deformity and a little sort of swelling there. So can you see the swelling there? Okay. And a shortening of 1.5 centimeters in his right tibia. So these are the radiographs. I've just taken off the pelvis, the femoral radiographs. But if you see that there is a little varus of around 8 degrees in the distal tibia and a shortening. So my question to Dr. John is, would you consider a bar excision here?
Yeah, okay. So I think bar excision would depend on a few things. One is the size of the bar. So you need to map out the bar.
So what would you like to do?
So I would get a MRI to be able to assess the extent of the bar.
So exactly. So that is what we did. So this is the MRI, and I have just put in the representative images. That's the MRI. That's the CT. And would you consider a bar excision still? That's the CT. That's the CT.
So you don't have the you have the cross sectional thing?
I don't have right now with
measured the.
It's not in the slides.
But
this is more than 50%.
Yeah, so that would.
So would you consider a bar excision here?
No, probably not.
Okay. And another interesting thing which was observed was this sort of
bump there.
a malunion there, and this was giving an appearance of a osteochondroma.
True.
So if you can see this swelling there, this one, this was giving the appearance of a osteochondroma, clinically as well as radiologically. This was. So exactly as Dr. John said, when to go in for a bar excision is if the bar is most of the people believe that if the bar is less than 35% or one third of the entire cross-sectional area of the physis. And the best way to evaluate that is either a CT or a MRI. MRI, you can do a bar mapping also. And the other indication is that other thing what one should keep in mind is that whenever you do a bar excision, more than 2 years of growth remaining should be there. And this is thing from the Journal of Pediatric Orthopedics 2019, where they have done even up to 50%. So that is why this figure of 50%. But I think most of the people will not do a bar excision if the bar is more than 35% of the entire cross-sectional area. So what we did was we excised this piece of malunited bone there that was acting something like osteochondroma, and that was actually causing him a lot of pain, and did completed the epiphysiodesis and did the epiphysiodesis in the fibula. So my question to Dr. Manish. Dr. Manish, would you like to do anything further or is it okay? Please remember the shortening is 1.5 centimeters at this point of time.
Sir, I would like to wait here, sir. I would not like to go for any. Sir, what about his angular deformity at the ankle, sir?
It's
Sorry.
still there. You can see it's still there. This is post-op. It's still there. It's around 8 degrees, but there is a tilt.
Sir. So, I think, sir, I would be inclined to go for an osteotomy, sir. And
So what would you like to do here exactly? Because
sir, maybe I'd like to go for a supramalleolar osteotomy and
okay,
use a plate to, because 8
okay,
degrees we can do an acute correction, sir. I feel.
okay. So patient actually came back 1.5 years later. Patient still has a deformity. Now the shortening has increased to 3 centimeters. And the fibular overgrowth is persisting. You can see this is the lower end of fibula and that's the lower end of fibula. It's way down there. So actually that is causing a lot of deformity, plus some amount of malunion. So what was done was, sorry. Uh, Now, what we did was that we completed the epiphysio. So first lesson here is that you have to complete the epiphysiodesis if the bar is not resectable. Otherwise, that will lead to a angular deformity, which is more difficult to manage. So what we did here was remove the hardware on the fibula and did a shortening in the fibula so that the ankle mortise becomes better, and that's the situation after doing the fibula. And the same sitting, we did a lengthening to taking care of limb length discrepancy at maturity. So we lengthened actually about 4 centimeters, which we calculated was the limb length discrepancy at maturity. So we over lengthened by about a centimeter or so. And that's the corticotomy there. And in addition, since the tibia and fibula were not fixed, so we did a fibular osteotomy a little higher up and placed one pin in the fibula so that this plate and the distal area is protected and the plate does not come off. So this is a 4 years follow-up, and you can see that the distal angle is nice around 92 degrees, and that's it. And that's the function of the child. And you can appreciate there is a little bit of over lengthening there. The patella is a little higher, which we did for compensation at skeletal maturity. So question is how much growth from the distal tibia is there? So if you see, this is from the Rockwood and Green, and the distal tibia is 4 milli or 40% of the tibial growth. So it's a big amount of growth from the distal tibia as well. So the second lesson here is that the distal tibia is a significant contributor to the tibial growth. and this has to be factored in while doing a lengthening if there is a distal tibial physeal arrest. And Ilizarov can actually, we use the Ilizarov in the second stage, so it can be used for deformity correction as well as lengthening simultaneously. So that's it, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
So I thought that the bar was not 50%. It looked even less than 50%. So
No, it was actually
why-
more. I have put in. I can just show that screen again.
So I thought why the chance of excision of bar was not given at that age.
So this is more than you can see here. This entire thing is a bar. This is a bar. Sorry, and this actually malunited, and this was this one. If you see this area, this was giving the appearance of a osteochondroma. There, this was because of the malunion, and this entire thing is malunited.
So,
You can
but
see
if
this
the growth arrest was lateral, then
Yeah.
shouldn't he go into valgus rather than varus?
No, because of the overgrowth of the fibula.
Fibula. So it's the fibulas.
That's the fibula which is the
Overriding.
culprit here.
So that's why you did fibular shortening. Which
Yes,
was,
I did fibula
was
shortening in the
yeah.
initially because it was difficult to do it with a plate. So I passed a screw there after curating the epiphysis there. And the second stage we did this.
So just one thing I noticed, sorry, was that when he was squatting, his ankle was kind of going into valgus. Is that something was actually happening or just a position of the exercise?
No, this was just a position of the thing. But if you see him standing there,
Standing, it looks fine,
It's
but when he's
okay.
squatting, it tends
it's
to
just
kind of.
just a little. Just a position which he is keeping.
Okay, sure.
PN sir.
Yes, sir.
PN sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
sir.
good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. Hello, Dr. Altaf.
You see, yes, I will go with Professor John's words that there is some kind of a valgus at sketching.
You
and
can
that
see him
this could
standing
be-
there. You
Yes,
can
sir,
see him
but-
standing. This is the
but
same
sir,
patient.
This could be explained that you see the physis or the lateral aspect looks still depressed. That's why the tibiotalar joint shows some kind of incontinence.
These are the radiographs. You can see it's a perfectly normal looking ankle.
The other ones are the previous one.
So this is the current follow-up.
I just wondered how was this able to manage that, the local kind of depression here?
Can you
Because it
say
was
that
an
again?
isolated depression on the lateral aspect.
No, we did not do anything because that was it's very, very difficult to reconstruct that. The results of intra-articular osteotomy are not good in my hands, at least. This ankle area.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you anyway.
I'll stop sharing.
Sure.
Is there any other question, or can we move ahead with next case presentation?
Are there any questions from audience?
Not yet, ma'am. So I think we should move ahead with next presentation. Dr. Ritesh.
Yes, sir. The next talk is by Dr. P.N. Vasudevan, sir. He is a senior consultant at Thangam Institute of Orthopedic Surgeries in Palakkad, Kerala, an excellent Ilizarov surgeon and executive member of Asami India. Sir, please carry on.
Hello, yes. Can you see that?
Not yet, sir. Please share.
So there's a green arrow in the bottom.
Yeah.
You need to press on that.
Need to share the screen, Dr. Vasu.
If you're on full, then when you go down to the bottom central, there'll be a green box with an arrow.
I got that. That's what I'm looking for.
Vasu, sir, you are using Mac?
Yeah, Mac.
Okay, then when you have just clicked on the share button, na?
Yeah.
You must have received a window 1, window 2 on the Mac.
Yes.
Just click on the window 1 on the left corner side.
My presentation is open, but it's not
Yeah,
coming.
actually in Mac, na sir, when you
Yeah.
just open the Mac and you share the screen, there are 2 or 3 windows that come on the desktop.
Yeah.
So you need to click on that Windows one, or directly you can go to the PPT.
Do you want to go on to the next one and then come back to
I think go on to the next one. Yeah.
Vasu and
Go on
once
to the
he
next
got
one.
sorted out?
Go on to the next one.
Samshul, can we move ahead with your case? Dr. Ritesh, please.
Yes, sir. So next speaker will be Dr. Shamshul Huda, sir, from Rajeshwar Hospital, Patna, Bihar. He is a young and dynamic person and Joint Secretary of Asami, India. Shamshul, sir.
Yeah. Just a second. The slide is visible?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thanks. Actually, sir, I was supposed to present a case of forearm osteomyelitis in a Viratix case, but that case is not complete. So I'm just doing a discussion on the basic case of clubfoot, periodic clubfoot correction just versus Lesero. Not going into theoretical details. These are the basic deformities that we have of hindfoot of equinus, varus, rotation, forefoot erector, supination, cavus. We need to see associated conditions in this.
Dr. Samshul, can I interrupt?
Yeah. Yeah, please.
Please be loud. Your sound is
okay. Can you hear me?
Low.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the basic deformities that we see in any clubfoot case is the cavus, adduction, varus, and equinus. These are the deformities that can be seen in different planes, medial, lateral, and posterior. I will not be going to all the details. Just skipping these. Before any case, we do all the clinical scoring like Piranhis and Demiglos, on which we classify and plan that treatment. We also have to see the X-rays in the AP and lateral views in any case, like the talocalcanean angle, calcanean second metatarsal angle. So these angles we see in any case. These are the normal and the clubfoot cases. Management in young children, we go for pancity, casting, open release, or in older children, we can go for JES or Elizeo cases. The order of correction, if you are going for surgery, should be cavus, adduction, varus, equinus. So I'm going to discuss, compare two cases of clubfoot, one severe and one moderate, one serious old child and one 5 years old child, both having resistant bilateral clubfoot, neglected case with rigid deformity, surgical treatment was planned. These are the two cases, sir. The first child is 3 years and second is 5 years. For the first case, I planned JES, and for the second case, I planned Elizeo correction. Second case was moderate, and both were rigid. These are the clinical pictures. These are deformities that were found in the case. I calculated the X-ray findings on Bone Ninja app. So the talus first metatarsal angle was 30 degrees in AP view, and talocalcanean angle was 12 degrees. In the lateral view, the talocalcaneal angle was 25 degrees. The calcanean second metatarsal degrees was 51 degrees. And first metatarsal talus angle was 31 degrees. So before any deformity, we should calculate clinical and Dr. Vastavan needs to admit, please join him. Cannot do. Yeah. So this case, I went for JES, the first case. I applied tibial pin, calcaneal pin, and metatarsal pin as we usually do. Did a gradual correction with JES, pronation, then adduction and varus, and the equinus. In this case, procranial sternotomy was done. This is after the final correction. And after correction, around 4 weeks, I left the JES for around 6 more weeks, and then applied the cast and then braced until 2 to 3 months. And the patient was asked to come for follow-up another 1 year. This is the second case, just in comparison as a moderate case. I planned Elizero, applied one in tibia, one in calcaneum, and one in metatarsal. You can see the frame components. In this case, just want to discuss that I applied talar olive oils also for correction. I applied talar olive connection in both the foots, right and left. But after surgery, the left wire was impinging and irritating too much. So I had to remove the talar olive wire. The ring is still on the patient. So you can see the left side correction is little less. As you can also see in the X-rays, you can see the olive wires. Almost the correction has been done. I want to ask sir that at this age, at 5 years age, what is the rationale of applying talar olive wires to use as fulcrum? Ruta ma'am and John sir, please tell us, sir.
I tend to use a more or a less constrained apparatus where we don't put a specific fulcrum point. So we use the Ilizarov to distract, and then we do a couple of readjustments of the fixator once we've distracted, a little bit like the Jess. And
Yes,
that way you are following the principles of Ponseti because you're correcting it in the same direction. So I don't actually use an olive on the tailor head anymore. I did try it before, but I've stopped doing it.
Yes, Shamsul, actually, even I don't put olive oil in the talus. It becomes extremely painful. It gets infected and it's not really useful. As Dr.
Exactly.
John has pointed out, even I do the same thing. I loosen the foot, I distract the foot, and I sometimes once or twice do manipulation as they do squaring in Jess, so that kind of manipulations. And actually speaking, with such mild deformity that you have shown, I would treat it differently nowadays. Rather than Elizaro, I would go for an osteotomy or some minimal soft tissue release. So I would I won't use Elizaro in these cases, frankly speaking.
Or even Ponseti, you can do Ponseti in all
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. So even Ponseti, I will cast this foot for some time and then go for minimal soft tissue release. So I would treat it differently altogether. But regarding the talus wire, I don't put it and I won't advocate it.
Okay, ma'am. The patient already had casting before, so he just didn't want casting anymore. It was a relapse case. She wanted surgery. So just to compare, I wanted listen in this case. In a rather adolescent case, when we have more bony deformities like a flat top talus, ma'am, I used in this case V-ostomy, and the correction was done. What is your suggestion about V-ostomy in more adolescent cases, ma'am? Yes, sir.
Yeah, V-osteotomy is an excellent osteotomy, but it's technically quite difficult, at least in my hand. So I go for other osteotomies. I go for midfoot osteotomy.
Right.
I published it actually in IGO about the midfoot osteotomy. So, but yes, if you can do V-osteotomy, it's a good osteotomy, no doubt about it. It can correct all the deformities in forefoot, midfoot, and hindfoot. And I can see you've done a good job here.
Thank you, ma'am. And what is the age restriction, ma'am, for the cases of Jess versus Elizaro that you think, ma'am?
To be frank, I don't use Jess.
Okay, ma'am.
I don't.
I actually, for the same reason, I have shown both the cases of Jess and Elizaro, Jess in a quite younger child, because Elizaro, I think, ma'am, will be quite heavier in a younger age, like this.
Yes. See, Dr. Shamsul, with Ponseti, I use Ponseti for younger children nowadays. Even relapsed cases, I use Ponseti, and they work quite well. So,
can I have a word?
Dr. Ruta, I think I'll agree to that.
Yeah.
Dr. Shamsul, can I ask you a question? What do you do to the contracture of the toes?
Sir, for the toes contracture, we can apply wires if the contracture is too much, or we can just do manipulations or just give a small.
Can you be a bit louder? I mean, you're not audible.
Can I hear me, sir?
Yeah.
If the contracture of toes is too much, we can apply wires in the toes and put on the rings or the bars.
Okay.
But if it is, yeah.
No, what I usually do, if in case, my indication for Elizarov is all those cases who have been actually operated earlier with a lot of fibrosis. And almost all of them, they end up with contracture of the toes. But what I do at the time of removal of Ilizarov is under GA, and then, just you stretch out the toes under GA and put in a cast, and they do it. I mean, I have never faced a problem of a contracture of a toes ever after that. You
Yeah.
don't need to. I mean, I have never put in wires.
I think you have to be a bit careful during the process, because I've seen some of them actually dislocate their joints. They get so badly contracted.
Yes.
So you can't let that happen during the treatment.
Yes, I agree. But one case I had a subluxation, but I was able to stretch it out at the time
you
of.
can usually that works. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Dr. Samshul?
Yeah.
Dr. Samshul?
Yes, please.
Can I ask?
Yeah, sure, please.
My question is to you and other senior faculty as well. As Ruta ma'am has commented that she is more in favor of Ponseti in most of the cases sometimes, and she don't use JES. The same question is mine, that what's your criteria for the selection of the patient? Means nowadays we can get the good amount of results in with Ponseti also. Then how you decide that which patient to be followed by Ponseti, which by JES, which by Ilizarov? What's your selection criteria? And I ask this question to senior faculty as well, just to throw a light on this selection criteria.
Okay. If you ask me, I try and put all of them through a serial casting program. Okay. So only the ones which don't respond at all, then I would plan for, or even if I'm planning for Ilizarov or JES, I would get some correction with serial casting and then put on the fixator, so that you're not putting the fixator on in a really deformed position. And that's how I do it.
Okay. Sir,
can I add something?
Sir, to John, sir. Sir, is there any age at which you are more in favor of moving to Ilizarov or JES? Is there any age criteria for that?
So again, like my use of JES has really, I used to use a lot of JES at one time, and now the numbers have really gone down significantly. So if I do have to use a fixator, it's often a Ilizarov, but there's still few patients where I would use the JES, but in a slightly younger age group where they're not responding to serial casting. What we do normally is a combination of casting and then osteotomies. So you can do a lateral column shortening, medial column lengthening, calcaneal osteotomy, things like that, rather than going for the JES fixator in the 6-year, 7-year age group. Okay. So
can I have a word?
Can I add on something?
Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, in a non-operated foot.
Yeah.
I mean, I have never put a JES.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or a Ilizarov. It is only the operated which are very badly scarred, where if you try to manipulate, you hardly have any movement. That's the only indication where I put a Ilizarov.
Means in operated cases.
Operated elsewhere. I don't operate.
Okay.
UMST I've done elsewhere. And coming to
can I have a word?
Yeah, please, sir. Please, Altaf.
Yes. You see, first, like Shamsul showed these cases, they should have been preferably first tried on a cast. That's point one. I have had a very good experience with JES as well as Ilizarov. I published a series on JES also, and I had wonderful results. And I will agree with PN sir that I wouldn't take those patients who had not been treated by Ponseti earlier. I would definitely take the residual ones who had been operated, STRs and all those scar tissue. So what is the problem with both methods? JES is light, yes, of course, but it needs frequent manipulations. That's with both Ilizarov as well as JES. But JES is not dynamic at all. You have to change every time. You have to every time unmount it and again put in the clamps. Ilizarov, I would prefer if you have a rotational component as well. Like sometimes you have a fixed supination deformity, and the ring gives a benefit of giving a derotation as well. And second thing, now recently I have modified it in such a way, I made it dynamic, more dynamic, so that you don't have to open the, like Johnson said that I would also do it before that. You would be changing it every now and then to put it, reposition it into the corrected position. But now I have made it in a dynamic way and following exactly the Ponseti methods, wherein I do put in a talar screw so that it becomes a thumb of the Ponseti and leave the calcaneum and rest of the foot to move as a unit calcaneopedal block. I will share with you sometime, and I think that's going to be an advance in that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Dr.
I mean-
Altaf, Dr. Altaf, do you connect that talar screw with the tibial frame?
Yeah. I use a shank screw on the talon net so that your talon
used to do that,
remains fixed with the tibia, while as the rest of the foot moves with the calcaneum and the foot moves together. That's the actual idea of having Ponseti principle.
I tried that actually, but didn't work in my hand. I had a
I
lot of
did-
problems with that talus shanspin. Anyway,
So I think nowadays another problem with the JES is that these repeated manipulations mean anesthesia. And in the COVID area, that again has become a more of an issue than it used to be.
Though,
So,
sir, we didn't use it under anesthesia, but it's painful for the child.
no, but yeah, but what I'm saying is with the remanipulations with the JES under anesthesia, it's become an issue now because of COVID also.
true.
One question is from our audience to Dr. Shamsul. Actually, this question is from Dr. Wilfred Disa from Goa. That what is the principal advantage of Ilizarov frame over JES to Dr. Shamsul? Dr. Shamsul, you are muted.
Mute.
Okay, sorry. Ilizarov frame is always more stable and more dynamic in the comparison to JES, where I feel JES has limitations of age, and Ilizarov we can use straight from 3 to 5 years to adult cases. It's a more modular implant regarding hinges and all as compared to JES.
Can I make my point?
Yeah, please, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah. See, what is the role of JES or Ilizarov in treatment of CTEP? It's only an extension of your finger. We're actually doing a Ponseti on that patient, but since the POP cast is not able to give the result, we are using a tool which is directly onto the bone. So you get better force concentration on the area where do you want it. And the way you hold on the talus is actually overkilling the Ponseti method. The talus is normally stuck at the ankle by the middle malleolus and lateral malleolus and the calcaneum underneath. So as Ponseti said, you don't have to touch calcaneum talus, you don't have to touch the calcaneum. So what I do is I just distract everything. So once you distract it, at the end of the distraction, maybe in 1 month or 6 weeks, depending on the case, I disconnect all the rods, whether it is JES or Ilizarov, and do a final Ponseti correction on that patient. Under anesthesia, I do a final Ponseti and check under CM that because my soft tissue are lax now. And I keep it in the position where I want and lock my frame in that position. I will hold the reduction or subtalar joint and ankle joint, everything in the position. Even some subluxation, whatever happened, I correct it. And I will hold it and my assistant will lock it. And that is my principle because I don't touch the calcaneum talus. I have to do a final Ponseti once you are happy with the distraction.
So that's
the
how
role of the distractor is only soft tissue lengthening.
Yeah, so that's basically how I approach it. I might do one in between sometimes. Nowadays, I tend not to because giving an anesthesia for a child in the COVID area has become a bigger problem than it used to be. You need to get the tests done and the costs also go up. So we tend to try and do it one adjustment at the most, as you said, yeah.
Okay, just 1 or 2 lines by me, because just Shamsul asked me this question. See, I tend to do Ponseti casting on more and more patients now. Even if they come late or even if they're relapsed treat, I do casting till I get a plateau of correction. Once I get a plateau, then I tend to go for osteotomies more and more nowadays, having done many Ilizarovs for club fit up till now. So अब मैं थोड़ी ये हो गई हूँ, सयानी हो गई हूँ. Now I go for more for osteotomies, to tell you frankly. And I use Ilizarov only when, as Dr. Gupta said, when the foot is really stiff, very scarred, then I go for Ilizarov. And nowadays, even I go for osteotomies with Ilizarov. So that makes my correction even faster. Okay,
Yeah.
I think we have had enough discussion. If there are no audience
Sure.
questions, we'll move ahead, Ravi. Is it?
There is one more question from Wilfred Disa. That
Okay.
does the shape of the cuboid dictate what method of correction is preferred? Any senior faculty want to take this question?
I think the bone in children is actually like an ice cube.
Yeah.
When you maintain the soft tissue shadow, soft tissue shell in the position you want, the bone will take its own shape. Even the I've seen calcium talus and everything getting remodeled. Once you maintain the space, your body will not allow any vacuum inside.
So,
You just have to maintain the
and
anatomy.
second thing
And yeah, in children it works.
Yeah,
In
and in children,
yeah,
in
Alta.
children you have in children you have, once you have put in the frame, it induces some kind of an osteoporosis also, and then the cartilage remold is over there.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you,
yeah,
sir.
okay.
One question to Ruta ma'am, please. Ma'am, will you consider JES for primary use in syndromic clubfoot, which are the non-operated syndromic clubfoot, which are quite stiff? Would you still go with Ponseti, or you will consider some external fixation and distraction for such cases?
What is the age of the child? Depends.
Means the small children below 5 years, where JES is an option.
See, even in syndromic cases, I try to loosen the foot. There is literature support for that also. You can loosen the foot. You won't get complete correction like idiopathic, but you will loosen the foot and you will get some correction. And as I told you, I go more and more in favor of minimal soft tissue release and osteotomies if needed. I'm not in favor of just using in young children. No, I won't.
I would like to add one point to this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are doing a lot of syndromic clubfoot and neurological clubfoots.
Okay.
And there we have felt that Ponseti correction gives good result, but to
Yes.
a limitation is there.
Of course. Yes.
And once we have a standstill, no correction is there, then we can go for minimum soft tissue release. And without major bony surgeries, we are getting good results in this patient. Instead of having good radiological picture, but functionally and cosmetically, the foot is better.
Correct.
Instead
I agree.
Yeah. That was what Sahare, I think the great anatomy professor from Mumbai was telling. The bones in children are like ice cubes. Whichever the container you use, it takes the shape. You just get into the shape. The bone will remodel into its own shape. So
That's
in
Dr.
children, bones are very soft. Soft tissue is very tight, very hard.
That was Dr. Manu Kothari, the anatomy guy.
Okay.
There is one question to faculty.
Thank you.
That Vasu sir.
Yeah.
There is one question to faculty that from Dr. Satish Nesri, that is there any recurrence of deformity following ring removal? What's the percentage of that thing?
Yeah, many of the cases, you may not get the perfect correction. You get a spurious correction. It look like you have got the correction.
Okay.
Because many people, they won't do the molding at the end of it. So those cases will try to go to the original position. The failure is more in the spurious corrections. Even in JES, it happens.
Okay.
Even in Illustrator, it can happen. It may not be given it will appear like fully corrected, but it will go back because the correction is actually spurious.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Sir, is it?
Actually, you need good amount of bracing post removal.
Yeah.
My word for this. You need to do years together of bracing. So I burned my fingers not giving bracing. So go for good amount of bracing post removal.
Actually, my next question was on bracing protocol, but without wasting time, I can ask later on. Just Dr. Ritesh, can we move ahead with next presenter?
Yeah, I'm ready now.
Yeah.
Yeah, please, sir. Please.
I changed my laptop.
To a regular one.
No, same Mac, but that was a new Mac. Mac M1. I'm doing my Zoom on that for the first time. So can you see this?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah, today I'm talking about a very complicated or very interesting deformity with lot of teaching in it. Yeah. Can anybody say, I think I have presented this case in so many places, people may be knowing it. So can anybody find out what is the real deformity? In 2006, this 13-year-old girl came to me with this deformity. She was described as a very complicated deformity of left hip, left knee, left ankle, along with the severe shortening and very interesting 180-degree of rotation. And when you take an X-ray, you can see this was the X-ray which I got from the AP view. See, the neck is lateral and fibula is on the medial side, and I could not see the femoral joint or knee joint line. It was a complicated issue there, and there was no signs of any infection or sinuses in the child. And this groove was filled with fungal growth. So when you are stuck with such cases, the only way is when you stick onto the lower limb evaluation, you need a full length standing X-ray. Think about how to take a full length standing X-ray in this girl. It was not possible as she could not even stand with both limbs, and the heel was looking anteriorly. As our conventional tools of investigations were of no help in deciphering the condition, we had to fall back on our clinical skill and common sense to sort out the problem. So, on detailed clinical evaluation, I tried to locate her tiny patella, and that was found somewhere there, and de-rotated her limb to keep the patella facing the roof and the knee axis parallel to the floor. It was amazing. It just got transformed into a pure genu valgus, like this. It was an extreme femoral valgus. And you can see here the lateral opened out because the tibia was not able to lie here because of the bulkiness of the thigh. The tibia was pushed laterally, medially. And you can see the natural compensation. So this is a normal anatomical position. If she wants to bring the foot here, she has to flex the knee and the heel comes anteriorly. And the residual flexion deformity, apparent flexion deformity, she has to bend the hip, flex the hip. And the shortening has to be compensated by equinus and flexing the other limb. That was how she was walking. I don't know whether this will work here because I changed the computer. I think that is not working, but that's okay. Now I got the X-ray in that position, and now I have to detail plan it. So in such small films, the only way is we have to stick on to the anatomical axis planning. So I've drawn the hip joint orientation line and the proximal anatomical axis. I got the distal joint line of the femur and the distal anatomical axis. So these lines are not meeting anywhere. So where is the cora now? They are not meeting in the bone, but at a point very far lower down under the ear somewhere. Now, as we could not directly locate the cora, a middle line was drawn at the middle fragment, so that now I got the 65 degrees valgus at this level and 105 degrees valgus at here. So totaling 170 degrees of distal femur valgus. And based on this calculation, I have to do a osteotomy here and another osteotomy here to correct it. And my bone ninja showed a correction like this. And plus, of course, along with extra lengthening. And no report of such severe genu valgus deformity in the literature is, I have seen it earlier, and not even about the correction. Now, what are the expected problems in such bad cases? So you must always remember about the soft tissue, which is one of the commonest enemies of any illusosurgeons. So here, the IT band may be tight, very, very tight, and the vastus lateralis may be contracted, And such an extreme valgus, when you correct it, there are chances of peroneal nerve palsy. And don't forget about the vascular problems. So all issues can happen there. And the other issue is how to put a hardware here, how to make a pre-assembly for this deformity, and how to control all these three fragments with rings and pins, how to place hinges, and how to place distractors. And how will you pass a reference wire in the distal tibia, distal femur? How can you pass a olive wire here? So all these are headaches. Now again, you have to do 2 corticotomies, but there is no space from the lateral side. I cannot put my finger anywhere here. So I have to do an osteotomy from medial side. I have to put an osteotomy here from medial side. I have to put pins here on the medial side and everything on the medial side, and lateral side is completely blocked. And where will be the posterior neurovascular bundles in this deformed limb? So I took the patient for a Doppler location. I did a Doppler and the course of the femoral artery was marked. So this marking, the pen will, as soon as you do a preparation on OT, the whole thing will go off. Then I was thinking about what to do. Then my daughter said, it's very easy, just get the 5 rupee henna and apply on top of it. I just did the henna, that girl herself did it as per my daughter's advice. He put a mark there and I did all the rubbing, everything, and it withstood all the surgeries, scrubbing, washing, everything, and it stayed for another 2 weeks. So that was a good skin marking on table. And I made a pre-assembly like this. So see, you can see it's all half rings. So there is no way I can put it here. This half ring and an arch, and this is for the middle ring. This is for the distal. This is for proximal tibia. This is for distal tibia. And I have to keep a distractor between these two. So, and future I have to add further rings. As it comes out, another ring here, and this has to be converted into half ring and complete it. So all these were planned. And I did an IT band release percutaneously. I was not courageous enough to do a peroneal nerve release because I could not even see around that area. And both corticotomies I did through the medial approach because I know where the artery lying, medial approach. And the pins on the medial side, I put everything from the medial side, middle fragment. And this you can see 2 pins on the medial side. And here you can see 2 pins on the lateral side. Plus I put a cut olive to the arch. So this was stable. And with the 2 pin that was stable. With the 2 pin here and the tibial frame. And I was not expecting any knee movements as we are planning for full correction of lengthening and correction of deformity in one go. And because the sheep cannot afford everything. So, and I told them already, it's a sacrifice for the correction. And we will think about knee later. So you can see now, it's gradually coming out. It opened out here, it opened out there, and further opened out. Here again, it has still more improved. You can see it is lengthened now. So you can see the regenerated both levels, here and the top. And I got good length, and it's practically made straight. So this was after a few 2 weeks after the surgery, it has come out a little bit. Now I added further rings. You can see I've added further ring. This is, I'm waiting to add. You can see the distractors improving further. I added further rings again, and again distractors going on, and still more. And I've got the full correction now. And she was walking like this. And after 2 years, she is happy with the outcome, and she has just 30 degrees of knee movements. And unfortunately, because in this Mac, while doing the emergent transfer, the video is not working. Anyway, the take-home message is nothing is impossible. We must have a strong basic knowledge on the system, good clinical skills, a proper evaluation, imagination, proper understanding and planning. We must have a good willpower and courage and take time on that, know our tools well, and most important is keep your mind open, and then only your eyes will see it. Thank you.
Excellent case presentation, sir.
Yeah.
That's an amazing
Thank-
case. Yeah.
yeah.
Are there any questions? Otherwise,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. Vasu, I just have a comment actually. So I always look for easier solutions. So I would have done an opening wedge correction in the distal femur. You know, I would have removed a wedge and corrected the deformity distally at least to some extent. So it would have been easier for me to put in wires and everything there. So that's one
when
more
you
way
do
to
an acute,
approach.
Yeah, but then the peroneal nerve, you have to be careful with.
Yeah.
Any acute correction in something like that.
and you can have kinking of because the femoral artery.
Mm.
Okay.
So
Sir,
gradual, definitely, I mean, you could do it in 2 stages, but
extent.
this is fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Really a fantastic case.
not completely, you know, partial correction. Actually, I've done in tibia a similar way, but
Yeah.
partial correction, not so that I
Sure.
could put wires. Okay.
Okay.
Ma'am, may I?
This is
Yeah,
wonderful.
please go ahead.
This is
Sir,
wonderful.
Sir, Dr. Vasu, sir, this is a mind-blowing presentation which you just did. I had 2 things. One was a small comment, and the other was just this thing. Comment was that when certain deformities like these present, and when you have people sitting beside you or around you, or maybe the patient has taken some consultation outside, they would always come with suggestions that this might just do better with an amputation or something. But I feel this is a perfect case where even if an amputation was done for any weird, by any weird person, any weird surgeon for any this thing, the result which you have just shown would anyway be can be compared far better than with the prosthesis and all that, even the quality of life, even without a movement at the knee joint. Second thing, sir, just wanted your opinion on the use of 6-axis fixators. I'm sure you must have done it way back, and that time maybe those fixators may not have been in vogue here. So would you consider using 6-axis fixators these days if such a deformity comes to you? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, none of the 6-axis deformity correction methods will work in this case.
Yeah.
It will work only for a magnitude of around 30 to 40 degrees.
Yeah.
More than that, none of the 6-axis will work.
And you can't get rings around that area, so it's almost impossible.
Sir, my why
You can't fix it.
I'm doing it, but what I am using 6-axis not for the main correction, fine tuning.
So
because suppose I have a translator or suppose I have a rotations or some minor ambulation, everything together, I put upon the because the SUV and correct it.
So maybe, sir, why this thing came to my mind is because of the structures at risk, as you also mentioned, and you had done a meticulous planning pre-operatively, sir. I think that would have certainly helped you. But then there is a scope that today what we don't have in 6-axis fixator systems, we can have some more. Maybe in years to come, we can have some more modular devices based on that, which can be easily applied in such cases. Sir. That was all I wanted to say.
Okay.
Sir, I have one question. What was the reason for such a severe deformity, sir? Could you find out while evaluating the child? Because it's very rare to see such a severe deformity in femur.
There was
unilateral.
probably I can only presume it. Probably it's an IT band tightness. Probably something during the infancy. But there is no sign of infection or sinuses or scars anyway. It appears like there is a band coming from GT towards the lateral, or because it is not on the tibia. The tibia was going little valgus, varus. Lateral joint was opened out. Some other band between the GT to the maybe some whatever is there. I just put I did a percutaneous release.
So what age did they start? Did they notice the deformity first?
Yeah, it was there from 2-3 years onwards.
Okay.
And in fact, the child came to me about 5 years before she presented me for treatment. And I suggested correction. She was there because they could not afford it.
Okay.
Now near marriage, they wanted everything to be corrected.
Vasu sir, there is one question from Dr. Kaushal from Varanasi that what was the duration of application of the Ilizarov frame?
It took 11 months. It took 11 months.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
things like this take time. There's no option here.
Yeah, it was brilliantly done case, sir.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Ritesh, we can move ahead with the next presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. So the next case is by Dr. John Mukhopadhyay, sir. He is the senior consultant at Paras Hospital, Patna, Bihar. And he is known to all of us. It doesn't need any introduction. And I'm sure we will all be benefited by his experience and wisdom.
Okay, so thank you, Ritesh. We're going to get on to the case. And this is a challenging case which he had to deal with some time ago. And this patient actually came from another city. And I've got permission to show this video, which was actually on YouTube for some time, I believe. I'm sorry about the noise. So this is the so the child is actually stuck here, okay?
Oh my God.
Okay, so the child was actually stuck under the wheel there. Okay, the one that you saw lying outside was actually the grandfather who was riding the bike, and he obviously passed away. And this was what was the first photograph which was done wherever he was taken into casualty. Okay, so that was the situation there. And they managed it with some debridement, and this was the X-ray. So the X-ray is not very dramatic, but it's really the soft tissue injury which is the big problem. And he came to us a few days later with this fixator on. There was a articular wire in the ankle to hold the ankle in place. And obviously there was no soft tissue at all on the tibia. And the other side also, there was no skin over the entire tibia. So initial debridement, then we put on an Ilizarov fixator and excise this segment of bone. I'll go through this because it's a long case. So there's the segment of bone that we had to excise. Again, very poor soft tissue, no skin, but we managed with the plastic surgeons to skin graft. So we had to do it on the left side as well as the right side. So we had to take skin from his back and various areas to get that cover. And then it was a question of transport. And because it was all skin that was stuck to the bone here, we decided not to transport the tibia, but do a fibula transport. Okay, so we did this corticotomy of the fibula on both sides. And then with these olive wires, we gradually transported the fibula under the tibia. That was what it looked like by the time we got this area under the bone and docked it and compressed it. And finally, we got it to heal nicely. Okay, and so you can see how a lot of this is just skin on bone. So he had skin graft from here, I think his back, etc., to cover all these areas. We did have the foot on a ring earlier, and even beyond the knee, because the knee was also moving around like anything in the initial period. And then finally, we put him on a cast, and things looked okay. But he came back a few months later, and he had developed a severe valgus deformity. Interestingly, no equinus, but this severe valgus deformity. You can see most of the ankle and this joints in the hind foot are more or less fused. And so it was a question of to decide on this correction. Okay, so what we planned here was not to try and do it exactly where the deformity was, but slightly higher up at a supramalleolar level with hinges and distraction using the Ilizarov. Okay, so that's how we planned it with hinges based on the planning and distraction which went on, and then finally we got it reasonably well corrected. And that was what he looked like by the time we took the cast off. You can see he's gone on to heal well. And this is a subsequent follow-up. You can see he's walking reasonably well. And the last follow-up I've got is again here. He's got about almost 80 degrees flexion there. So a reasonably okay result considering the level of the injury and the soft tissue injury involved, and especially since both limbs were involved there. So it made any flap surgery a little more difficult. So I think the take-home message is that trauma management can be complex. Watch out for complications, plan your management carefully, and then communicate. So what you need to make very clear to these patients early is that this is not going to be one stop surgery. It's going to take multiple procedures. We may have to adjust our plans along the way so that they don't then get upset when you, at the end of one long treatment, you say, oh, he's got to go through another treatment and a third treatment. And then eventually he may need limb length equalization at skeletal maturity because you are not sure how much damage there's already been to the physis, etc. Okay, thank you.
It's a fantastic case.
Sharing. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So,
Are
happy
there any
to take
questions?
questions or discussions on it?
Sir, one question I want to ask, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, Ilizarov was applied before soft tissue coverage, or soft tissue coverage was done with Ilizarov?
Yeah, it was done because we excised the bone that was totally avascular, where the wire, etc., had been put on the frame. We actually had to extend the frame beyond the knee at a second stage because we found that the knee was subluxating in various directions. But we did the flap, the skin grafts with the Ilizarov frame on. Okay.
But it is usually difficult to put a skin graft while Ilizarov ring.
Why? Split grafts are not a problem. If it's a flap,
Okay.
it becomes an issue. But skin grafts are not a problem.
But excellent result is there. Such a bad injury. Many times these are amputated immediately.
Yeah, I think that's something also you have to discuss because I think he had been told there's no option but to amputate. And then they have to be willing to go through this process because I think we sometimes forget the hardships patients have to go through during treatment just to try and salvage the limb and end up with a useless limb which you end up amputating 2 years or 3 years later. So I think all these things must be clearly communicated. We are lucky we managed to get a reasonable knee range of motion and we've been able to get a reasonable limb which he can walk on and he's quite happy with it, but another patient may not. And sometimes I think amputation is a easier answer in these situations.
Sir, just wanted to take your opinion. Like this is a classical mangled extremity, sir.
Yeah.
And we've heard you only speaking many forums and learned a lot from you. Sir, so would you go for a regular like scoring systems before you actually take up the patient, explain him? How do you proceed with this, sir? It's difficult to convince such patients on either side. So would you give us some tips?
So I think so there are 2 or 3 things you need to look at. One is age, because children, the healing potential is very different from adults. Second, if it's a multi-systemic injury, okay, then it's a totally different thing. Because if he has a chest injury, an abdominal injury, a head injury, then in doing all this fancy work, you might end up risking his life in doing it, okay? So here, because his other systems were pretty okay, it was only his limbs that were involved, the problem is a little different. Okay, so these are 2 things you need to keep in mind when you're doing, yes, doing scoring systems always helps, but what is most important with these is to not miss out other systemic injuries, which will compromise risk of life to the patient while you're doing all these. So we see patients with polytrauma and there's an injury in the limb which you would otherwise salvage. But in trying to salvage that limb, you end up risking the life of the patient. So sometimes it's better in those situations to amputate early and then concentrate on his other injuries rather than try to do very fancy, dramatic reconstruction works for a foot injury. Okay.
Thank you.
It's a great effort, John. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nice.
Great case.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Dr. Ritesh. We can
Yes, sir.
move to
Yes, sir.
Altaf
So
now for next presentation.
yes, sir. So now I invite Dr. Altaf Kausa, sir, for his talk. He is professor of orthopedics at Government Medical College, Srinagar, J&K, and he's doing amazing work with Elizero. Sir, please.
Okay, so is my screen available?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
Okay. So I'll be discussing about this post-traumatic severe valgus deformity of an ankle in a child. So this was a 10-year-old boy with a history of road traffic accident at the age of 5 years. This was a crush injury with loss of extensors and had a kind of mechanical foot drop. This is the severe valgus. So this is how he would walk. Now, the most important thing is to analyze this deformity. So this was a post-traumatic arrest here and severe valgus. Then looking at the anatomical axis, then he drew the axis from the ankle like this. So it shows that the fora would be somewhere here, very close to the ankle. Why I chose this case is that I would like to share the importance of the ankle deformities and its influence on other joints. So what you do is you take this long axial view. Here you got to analyze. This is the, this is the tibial axis, long tibial axis, the ankle, the talar axis, and this is the calcaneal axis. So what I want to highlight is that in order to compensate, if you have an ankle valgus, then there is a varus compensation at the subtalar joint. So if you have a valgus deformity, there's a good chunk of valgus varus compensation. It could go up to 30 degrees at the subtalar joint. And now interesting thing is, if the secondary deformity is flexible, then once you are done with the correction of this promalleolar osteotomy, this will come back. But if this deformity is fixed, while you have corrected the ankle valgus, the subtalar would still remain in the varus. So in such a situation, you might need to do a varus this Dwyer osteotomy, kind of osteotomy in the calcaneus, or the foot would remain in varus. So here we use the osteotomy rule 2, looking at the cora here. Couldn't do an osteotomy here, so you have to do an osteotomy up. And then the hinges here are distal to the ankle, with the result that would create a compensatory translation so that the final mechanical axis would go through the main alignment. This was the planning. So here again, I would like to highlight this by my diagram that you do an osteotomy here. So you translate it, compensate. And now this is the point. If you have a fixed deformity, this will remain in varus. Once you have corrected the ankle to the horizontal level, this will remain in varus. In case this is a flexible one, once you are done with this correction, the mechanical axis restoration would put it back into original position. But if you have to have this in a fixed thing, this deformity is there, then there would be some valgus left to have the axis in straight line. So we planned it. So you have one ring at the proximal tibia, middle, and then you have used a ring here and in the calcaneus. Here I would like to highlight that I use many a time these half pins, because actually once you are creating a force in such a deformity, the pins don't resist that much stresses. So I tend to use these shank screws, pediatric shank screws, in addition to the routine pins. The hinges were placed around the cora. This is during correction. Now the wedges are opening up in the fibula as well as the tibia, and there is some kind of a translation happening, and the ankle is started correcting. This again during correction. Now, once we are analyzing these deformities, that we only concentrate on the one plane, the frontal plane. But most of the time, once you have a severe valgus or varus deformities, they have associated rotational malalignments. Now, once your valgus is corrected, your rotation is manifest now. This is the patella, and the foot is internally rotated. At this juncture, I added the derotation bars, and now look at the alignment of these anterior clamps. And then gradually, once we did the rotation correction, you can see now the patella and the foot is in one line, and you can appreciate this much of internal rotation has happened. If these were the clamps here, so it has moved to this much of level to have the final correction. This is final correction. You have an external clinical correction. And looking at the x-rays, now concentrate on this. There is some kind of a valgus remaining, but the whole axis is normal since there was fixed varus in this case. So why this was a welcome step for me. For the time being, it would give me some kind of a relief that your axis is right, and I had the potential of manipulating this. So next stage, I did fasciitis of this area because this was still open. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, great.
Dr. Altaf, can I ask you something?
Sure.
Did you consider the epiphyseal because there is a deformity in the ankle, and I think
Begin with, you mean to say, sir, to begin with?
No. At this point, I mean, whenever you want to do, you can do it at the beginning or at the end. It is your choice.
What's your question, sir? May I have your question again?
Did you consider epiphyseal here?
Yeah, of course, I did it later. But if I had considered to begin with, I would not have expected a growth from the lateral aspect. That's why I did.
So you actually did a physeal distraction on the lateral side.
No. I did a supramellar osteotomy only, sir, because this was a damaged physis. I wouldn't expect that if I had fasciitis, the middle aspect, the lateral wouldn't grow. The deformity would still be static. Okay. So to begin with, this last fasciitis I only did to prevent further deterioration if there was some growth left on that side.
I think this case brings out an important point, is that especially when you have these distal tibial or ankle deformities, very often there's a compensatory deformity in the subtalar joint in the opposite direction. And when you're correcting them, you have to be careful not to end up going in the opposite direction at the subtalar joint level by correcting the higher level completely. So you need to assess it very carefully and sometimes undercorrect. This is why I asked PN that question, is why was his ankle going into valgus? Because otherwise his correction looked absolutely perfect on the tibia. So whether the subtalar joint was going into a slight valgus or not was the reason I asked that question.
That's why, sir, may I have a word? That's why I left that self-correction there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Such cases, we have to take a stress view of the subtalar joint.
Yeah, see if it is
on table, or if at all you are getting the correction in the subtalar joint, lock the subtalar joint in the position where you want, and then do the supramalleolar correction. I too have the similar cases. I don't know. We used to get similar types. I have 2-3 patients, same type.
Yeah.
I have one. I have adult one also, because this one is the suitable case for this pediatric deformity, where I had a similarly a lot of valgus, post valgus, this actually post castrated fibula. Then you had a severe valgus, And then, but the deformity was supple, subpelvic compensation was supple. Once I used the half ring under the calcaneum, I was able to correct it fully. So I did full correction in that. But here it was fixed. So I was happy with some kind of under correction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Naturally, when
And I
you do
think
that. And
it's
sometimes the
what I've-
subtalar joint will go for fusion also.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Is it a good idea to keep the valgus in the distal tibia or correct it completely and then go for either osteotomy or fusion, subtalar fusion in future? So what is the better way? Keep the valgus in the...
That's a decision I think you have to make.
In such cases, sometimes that subtalar joint automatically go for fusion.
Okay. So I would correct both the joints. I mean,
I think what's important is to be aware of this problem so that you don't end up overcorrecting and then ending up in the opposite direction.
Yeah, that happens in long-standing knee replacement also.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in a severe genovirus or valgus, when you correct it, they can have subtalar joint problems.
Yeah.
As soon as you correct the total knee, do the total knee, they will come with the angle problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
You had mentioned about the.
Sir, we have done two cases of similar case as Dr. Altaf has shown here. One patient was 18-year-old and another patient was around 11-year-old. Both the cases, in one case, in 17-year-old, 18-year-old male boy, we did a supramalleolar osteotomy, but subtalar joint was supple. He got a correction. The same problem was there, that severe valgus at the ankle joint and subtalar was correcting itself or compensating by virus. But what was the problem of supramalleolar osteotomy? That there was shortening tibia. After correcting the deformity, we got a shortening of limb. So in those cases, we found that instead of doing simple supramalleolar osteotomy, we should go for Elizarov lengthening also in those cases.
Yeah.
You could do a
lengthening is not a problem.
That's something you have to plan because you have to then either distract. You plan your osteotomy so that you distract with your correction.
Yeah.
We correct it.
Are placed accordingly.
Dome osteotomy is another option. Dome osteotomy causes minimal shortening actually, lesser than opening wedge.
Yeah, when you're going from valgus to varus, you will usually get some relative shortening unless you do something about that. Yeah, because usually if they're not lengthened, you'll end up short. If they're lengthened earlier, you'll equalize them.
One question I want to ask to our seniors, that these valgus deformities are due to either childhood infections of fibula many a times, or it can be because of fibular non-union, atrophic type of non-union after having their injury at 5 to 6 years of age. Right now, our patient is on Elizarov, 8-year-old child having the similar problem because of post-traumatic non-union of fibula. So do you have any difference in results in those cases presenting with the severe ankle valgus?
No, the one reason is your mechanical axis actually not go through the center of the ankle and that way. When you plan in the planning, it's okay. But really, when you take the real mechanical axis, it goes little lateral to the ankle joint. So whenever they load it, it has always have a tendency to go for valgus. And that is why you have a very strong tibialis posterior tendon to correct it. Even the calcaneum is a little bit lateral to the when compared to the tibia.
Sir, I was asking that post and post-traumatic ankle valgus are two different entities. So in post-infective, there are severe soft tissue contractures. Peroneal tendons are shortened, contracted. So in those cases, while doing this lengthening, do you see the difference in result in post-traumatic and post-infective ankle valgus?
So again, it depends on the cause of the valgus as well. So it's not always, so even a fibular osteomyelitis, which involves the distal part of the fibula, will end up sometimes with valgus over a period of time, even if the tibia is not involved. Okay, so that's something, so that's a different situation from something which is caused growth arrest to the tibia. So you have to really assess them in terms of what has caused the deformity and then plan your treatment.
I have seen I have seen a case where the distal fibula, there was a cyst in the distal fibula.
Yeah.
In childhood, they excised it. There was
Excision
no
of
problem
a
with the
segment.
tibia. And that, yeah, a segment of the fibula was removed.
Yeah.
And they left it like that. So that was a small child. And by 6-7 years, they had developed severe valgus.
Yeah, especially if you excise it with the periosteum, then it doesn't.
Tibia
go
was
back.
perfectly all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can happen.
Altaf sir.
Yes.
There are 2 to 3 questions from audience actually.
Yeah.
One question is from Dr. Hitin Mathur, that would not undercorrecting the ankle cause ankle arthritis in the long run?
But you have to see the in toto. That's why I have done fasciitis, expecting that some kind of correction would happen from that growth.
Okay.
So, and if you left a varus at the subterranean, it's equally going to give you. You could choose between the 2 osteoarthritis, whether a subtalar one or at the ankle one.
Okay.
And then you have always some scope of correction in future also.
Okay.
No, Ravi, here he will do the fibular osteotomy plus tibial osteotomy.
Yeah.
And after correction, you can see the tibia and fibula will unite. When these two are united, even if a little valgus is there, it's almost like a middle malleolus part of a strong hole there. Where the ankle arthritis comes because of subluxation.
Yeah, definitely, sir.
So that becomes stable there. Many of such cases, it goes for single bone light.
Okay. Okay. And another question for Dr. Altaf is from Wilfred Disa, that is this a good case for 6-axis fixator? Sir, what do you comment?
So I didn't have any issues with the Ilizarov frame. So it's not a problem. You can use it and you can use your simple Ilizarov even.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And another question to you, sir, from Dr. Acharya Mandar, that is there a need of soft tissue release in this case?
No.
Okay.
No, because this is anywhere than in case of an Ilizarov procedure. This is distraction histiogenesis, not only distraction osteogenesis.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's the beauty of this procedure. You take care of the soft tissues as well.
Yeah, definitely.
The soft tissue stretches out as you distract. Yeah.
I think all of them got their answers. So, Dr. Ritesh.
Yes, sir. So the next talk is by Dr. Ritesh Runu, sir. He is additional professor at Indira Gandhi Institute of Medical Sciences, Patna, Bihar. And he is doing a lot of pediatric cases and is an active member of Asami India. Sir, please.
Am I visible?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is a case about a female 7-year-old child presented to us in September 20 with difficulty in walking and limb deformity. There was anterolateral bowing of tibia. So basically, this was the deformity in a 7-year-old female child, and she was having repeated fractures since childhood. So a case of osteogenesis imperfecta. And this was her X-ray. I don't have X-ray, but on CM we saw that. You can see that the tibia is sclerosed with a non-union, and there is bowing, anterior bowing of the leg. There was associated bowing of femur also, but tibia was fractured and it was tender. Patient was not able to walk with a shortening of around 3.5 centimeter. So we planned, this child was operated earlier. You can see the scar over the knee joint and over the bowing of the tibia convexity by endersnelling earlier somewhere, and then it was taken out. And now once the wire was removed, the patient again has refracture. So we planned for excision of this scar tissue and also doing a fibular osteotomy, and we did it with 2 incisions. The non-union site was exposed and the complete scarred bone as well as where medullary canal was not appreciable, that part was removed along with all the tissues around. canal was opened. And once we got a fresh bleeding from the canal, then Ilizarov ring was applied. This is the excised area, and then corticotomy was done. 6 weeks post-operatively, the distraction was complete, and there was docking of the mobile central segment with the distal fragment. But the limb was shortened, therefore lengthening was continued. And once there was only 1 centimeter shortening persisting, then we stopped it. And the patient was made to stand with support. At 12 weeks, when the frame was removed and the patient was kept on POP slab. Once the patient came after a week, we found that the limb is going in valgus and there was anterior bowing. So it was corrected in cast, above knee cast. At the end of 5 months, you can appreciate that there was bowing of femur also. But here we were treating only the tibia. There was valgus as well as, but the degenerate was strong enough. And in lateral view, you can see the tibia is straight. In AP view, there is a valgus. Clinically, it was fine. Mechanical access was fine. So the limb was supported with an external brace. Limb was supported in an external brace. And the patient was mobilized with the help of walker. And there is no movement at the osteotomy site as well as at the area where we excise the tissues. This was a case. The patient is fine right now. There is 1 centimeter shortening persisting. We did not went for over lengthening. As the child age is now 7 years, 7.5 years now. And we expect that whatever remaining femoral correction will be done later on. It may add up to shortening of it may correct the shortening which is persisting right now. So what we learned from this case that whenever we get a dysplastic bone segment, it needs to be, we need to go for complete excision. Otherwise, union at the excision site is very difficult in these cases. Canal should be vascular. And if we don't get a vascular canal, we should excise some more bone, which we can get by lengthening. The fixation by Ilizarov or any method should be very strong. Otherwise, the bony transport will become difficult in these cases many a times. Internal and external support should be there. And this support should be maintained till maturity. Otherwise, chances of refracture are very high. And once we get a good regenerate, we should mobilize this patient to have a good, better quality callus in these patients or regenerate in these patients. Thank you.
Dr. Ritesh, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Would you consider putting in a telescopic rod at this point of time?
Yeah.
Because these are known to cause refractures, and the very pathology that has led to this deformity would actually cause it again and again.
Yeah, definitely, Dr. Gupta. Yeah. In these cases, we should always support some type of intramedullary implant because the chances of refracture is very high in these patients.
Yes, yes.
But in this particular case, since there was a severe angular deformity, and we wanted to have some bone growth, regenerate, which we could not get by simply putting an intramedullary rod. So therefore, we went for Ilizarov.
No, would you consider it at this point of time? That is what my question is.
Yeah. So even after the Ilizarov correction, you could probably put a rod in?
Yeah. As you can see in our case, there was a good canal formed after, in this case, after bone regeneration. So we have already told the patient that after 3 or 4 months, once there will be good regenerate, we will go for intramedullary support so that till maturity, their chances of refracture comes down. Otherwise, with external support, many times patient doesn't follow our advice, may have refracture.
Did you try to find
I
out
make a
actual
com-
pathology?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sample was sent for biopsy, and we could not get some biochemistry, but they told that it was a fibrous tissue. It's a fibrous tissue instead of good bony tissue.
Could you not have been simply a CPT, kind of a CPT only?
Yeah, our diagnosis was that CPT clinically, but since the patient was also having femoral deformity, patient was also having fracture of other lower limb also. Therefore, we thought that it is more of a osteogenesis imperfecta than of a CPT alone, because femur is also involved.
Can I just make one comment?
Yes, ma'am.
I would have treated this by correcting the deformities and rodding it and let it unite first.
Yeah.
So you're really brave doing lengthening in osteogenesis imperfecta. Actually, they sometimes give a lot of trouble in forming regenerate. So I would have treated it in this way, that I would have corrected the deformity. I would have put intramedullary rod, and maybe later on, maybe even after skeletal maturity, I would have lengthened. So lengthening in these kids is my second priority, actually. Correcting the deformities and preventing fractures would be my first priority.
And I would like to add bisphosphonates also.
Dr. Ruta, can I add something? I think
Yes,
in this particular case, if you are concerned with the limb-length discrepancy, then you can consider a contralateral physiodesis.
Yes.
I fully agree.
I agree with Ruta.
I mean, it's
And
very
finally,
difficult.
you had to give him an orthosis, finally.
And the other point was that I think unlike pseudarthrosis, you don't often have to excise that much of bone in these.
Yeah. No, I mean, sir, I wanted to show that.
Why you don't have to?
You see the X-ray of this patient or the first photograph, the amount of a sclerotic area through which we could have negotiated any nail inside would have been very difficult. And this almost 90% of canal is sclerosed. We don't have any space there.
So can I add something? Dr. Ritesh, can I add something? It's a very, very common scenario that you have an intramedullary bone formation there. Yeah. And you really need to actually go with the, drill bits and image-guided drilling.
Create a
canal in some of these cases. And then you can actually pass in a guide wire and pass in a cannulated drill, and you have to really increase to pass a optimum implant there. So this is a very common scenario.
Ritesh?
Sir.
Yeah. Why do you say the sclerotic bone is a bad bone?
Yeah. Because these...
Sir, in this case, when we excise that area, the vascularity was very poor.
We are doing under tunicate.
No, sir. There was no tunicate in this particular case.
Actually, the bone you showed didn't look very bad,
Yeah.
It looked quite good, actually.
But it's not like that because it was sent for biopsy at the same time.
No, that sclerosis is only because of the abnormal mechanical stress.
Yes.
It's
that is because of the deformity and lot of actually force going through that area.
It's a good bone. You can just excise the fibrous tissue and dock it well, put a strong nail inside, it would have been better. When you lengthen it,
now she could be benefited by bisphosphonates as well.
Yeah,
true.
But when you put a Ilizarov on that, by distraction, sometimes you can see the bone, the wires will cut through the bone.
Yeah.
Instead of lengthening.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely, we have failed in some of our cases. So intramedullary nail, we have already advised to this patient, and we'll be doing that because of corona. A lot of surgeries are avoided, right?
And if you want to do lengthening, you can do actually a nail with a nail inside.
Yes, over a nail actually. You can do it later actually.
Yeah.
This is a very, very mild case of osteogenesis imperfecta. And some of these cases at the end, you have a situation which is called a popcorn.
No, it can be hypophosphatemic rickets also.
In this case, we already investigated the patient to find out any metabolic condition. But you are right, it can be. But in our case, what we have suggested next that we have given bisphosphonate, and we have asked the patient to, after 4 months, we'll be putting a rod to prevent any refracture.
Yeah, how long we have given the bisphosphonates?
We'll be giving it for 2 years.
So
yearly
that will actually affect the
5 years.
remodeling part.
Yeah,
Dr. Ritesh,
yeah.
yeah, there is one question from Dr. Sanjay Dhawan that how long was the patient in plaster and what was the total duration of your treatment?
The patient was operated in October. The patient was on Ilizarov for 3 months and in plaster for 2 months. Total of 5 months.
Okay. You got the deformity corrected in 5 months and Landring as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And Dr. Sanjay Dhawan wants a comment from the faculty that what if we do osteotomy of non-union site and displace it, let it work as a vascularized graft and make proximal and distal fragment to unite? Any other faculty want to comment on it?
Can you please repeat that? I just lost the connection in between.
Yeah, actually, what if we do osteotomy of non-union site and displace it, let it work as vascularized graft and make proximal and distal fragment to unite?
So when you osteotomize it, you're talking about removing a segment of it?
Yeah, I think so, sir. Basically,
Or you may be talking about a clamshell.
Yeah. So it depends on how you do it, because if you just excise it like that, you're going to devascularize it. But if you do a percutaneous clamshell kind of osteotomy, that's a well-known way of treating non-unions and malunions, in fact. More for malunions than non-unions.
Okay, thank you.
Ritesh, sir, it could be simply deformity correction, put a nail inside and do compression with Ilizarov first, let it unite first, then landing over the nail at the second stage.
Yeah, that's what all of us have been kind of talking about, basically.
Definitely, whenever these patients having the age left, if we go towards the younger age group, union should be the first priority. As the patient is moving towards maturity, we can think of union plus lengthening, because earlier age group, chances of, if we go for Ilizarov, refracture rate is very high. But as we are moving towards maturity, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, then that is not the risk. Refracture rate comes down, and then Ilizarov works well in these patients.
I'm sorry, but what was the age of this patient? What was the age?
7 years. 7 years, 7.5 years.
7 years. So he's quite away from the skeletal maturity.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, therefore we have asked for go for intramedullary nailing. We'll put a intramedullary nail.
Ravi, we are not doing so well for time management.
Yeah, so I think Ravi.
Discussion is going on.
It's very exciting, yes, but we also need to keep track of time.
Now our one speaker is only left, Dr. Ritesh.
Okay.
Dr. Ritesh Pandey.
Okay.
You are the last batsman. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, sir. Is it visible?
Not yet. Just move it forward.
Is your presentation open?
Yes, sir, it's open.
Yeah.
Now it's there. Now it's there.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so to complete the list, I will present a case of upper extremity, Ilizarov. So this was a 7-year-old girl child, and she had.
Please make it full screen. Please make it full screen.
Yeah.
Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was a 7-year-old girl, and she had a bilateral radial clump hand, and she was managed by centralization of both wrists when she was 15 months old, and deformity was corrected satisfactorily at that time as per the history given by her mother, and no previous record of the treatment given was available. To us, she presented with significant shortening in both forearm and a deformity on the left forearm. And clinically, the length of humerus was 22 centimeter on both sides. The right ulna measured only 7 centimeter, whereas the left ulna measured 10 centimeter. And the total deformity in left ulna, as you can see in this X-ray, was around 95 degrees. The elbow movements were pretty good. It was 0 to 90 on the right side and 0 to 110 on left side. The wrist was stiff and fingers were also stiff. It was not uniform, but few fingers were stiff. So she was a school-going child, and she was managing to write with her left hand. However, the parents were concerned about the significant shortening and the appearance of the limb. So as she was using her left hand and it was functional, so we didn't want to touch that first. We proceeded with a lengthening of the right ulna, and through distraction osteogenesis, 7 centimeter length was gained without any significant complications. And these are the pictures while she was undergoing this distraction. However, as the time progressed, and by the end of first year after this surgery on the right side, the deformity on the left side progressed, and it became worse. And now the total deformity was around 170 degrees, and this inhibited the child by using her left hand for writing purposes, and she was not comfortable writing with the right hand also. So it was a difficult situation for her. So in this case, as Dr. Vasudevan sir showed, it was a bit of similar situation. However, as suggested by Dr. Ruta ma'am, we did a close wedge osteotomy of the ulna, and that gave us partial correction and allowed us to put a simple frame over the forearm. And rest of the deformity was corrected by, it was corrected gradually along with the lengthening of the ulna. And in this extreme right radiograph, we can see that the olive wire which was used to include the hand, it has migrated, and it is lying, the olive is lying in the medullary canal of the first metacarpal. So she was taken up for a fixator readjustment, and an extra ring was added for the hand. The wires were also exchanged, and the deformity correction and lengthening was continued. And these are the final pictures showing good deformity correction and lengthening on the both sides. So here I would like to add that we did only a single osteotomy. We didn't put the osteotomy at every cora. Only a single osteotomy was done in the distal ulna, and the rest of the things remodeled well. And as you can see here, she started writing with her left hand again, and there is good movements at the elbow, and the limb is equalized. So the take-home message is the current treatment of radial club hand is largely concerned with correction of radial deviation, and there is little attention given to the ulnar hypoplasia as a sequela. In many cases, the ulnar deformity and shortening may be severe enough. It can be a significant disability, and it needs attention. And it can be beautifully done by gradual correction using an Elizarov fixator. And the planning and management was based on this paper from Japan by Dr. Kawabata et al. One can refer it for further details. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ritesh. Are there any questions?
Ritesh, it's a nice case. I just want to add that it's very, very cumbersome to actually have 2 rings in ulna, 2 or 3 rings in ulna. I mean, I would have gone with the same way. You cannot, I mean, that they would be so close apart if you put in another additional ring in between that you will not be able to put any sort of a distraction rod there.
So the only thing I would worry about here is in terms of functionality, how much actual improvement did she have in the function of her left?
Sir, function didn't improve significantly.
Yeah, exactly.
The only thing is,
the only thing.
yeah, she was. Yeah,
Because
earlier,
sometimes because of the deformity, these patients can do a lot of things with that hand, which you may then, unless you're doing the whole thing with polycization, etc., you may end up actually causing some loss of functionality by just correcting the deformity.
yes, sir, that was the concern. So we initially we didn't wanted to correct the left side, which was more functional, and she was
Yeah.
using that for writing purposes. But when
But
it
she
became
wanted
very
to-
severe and stopped writing with that hand, then
Okay.
yeah.
So she had lost function.
I think we have a good functional improvement in the sense that she started writing again.
No, if she
I think
stopped
it's good.
writing before, then definitely. But a lot of these kids, I know people who are adults
Yeah.
and they do everything with this deformed position, from writing to everything, and they
Yeah.
that
And I
doesn't.
think,
Yeah.
but
So you have
I
to be
think
very
it will
careful when. Sorry. So you have to be very careful
Yeah.
when you plan your treatment for these and explain all these things to them.
And one more thing which I wish to add here is that the children around the age of 7, they learn to adapt to,
Exactly. That's what I'm.
and
But
you
I
may
think
not actually
it's kind of
require a polycization there. You may not.
true.
Yes.
But I mean, I think you, in fact, at that stage, doing a polycization would be a disaster. You probably have to do it at a much younger age for it to.
Much
Yeah.
younger age.
And the finger was also stiff, sir. That index finger,
Yeah.
which is used for polycization, it was stiff. There was loss of movement in that.
So why did she stop writing before the treatment? That is what I would.
So the deformity progressed actually, and it became around 180 degrees, and that was inhibiting her from using it.
Because they actually hold their things in that position like that, okay? And they get to their mouth and everything else because of the deformity sometimes. So that,
Yes, sir. But the elbow movements were good in this child. She was
yeah, true. I mean, you should not do anything if the elbow movement isn't at least 80 or 70 to 80 degrees flexion, I guess. Okay, great.
Right.
Ruta, final comments from you.
Is there time for my presentation, Ravi, or we
Oh,
have to
okay.
stop?
Ma'am,
Yes,
we are
please, ma'am.
9:15. We can go ahead with that.
Yeah, sure. Just go ahead.
Please go ahead,
He said
ma'am.
it's the last presentation. That's why I thought you were not doing it.
Okay.
I could do a quick call. Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'll do a quick one. So I'm going to show a case of fibular hemimelia actually. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. So this child came to me at the age of 1.5 years. So you can see there is complete absence of fibula here. There is valgus of the foot. And in MRI, you can see the talus and calcaneus are sitting side by side instead of one below each other. So the deformities are foot is in severe valgus. The ankle is stiff. The foot is stiff actually. There is bowing of the tibia and there is shortening. This is classified by Pele as type 3B of fibular hemimelia. It is subtalar type. So most of the equinovalgus of the foot is coming from subtalar joint. So the surgery which is described by Pele in type 3 is called as super ankle. He does everything in one stage. He does radical soft tissue release on posterior lateral side, removes the fibular enlarge, and also corrects the tibial bow and lengthens the tibia in one stage. But I do it in 2 stages. So in first stage at 1.5 years, I did a soft tissue release. I did release the subtalar joint. There was no coalition, bony coalition between talus and calcaneus here. So I removed the soft tissue and I corrected the foot. I brought the foot below the tibia and put a wire. And then for about 1 to 2 years, I braced the child. And at the age of 3.5 to 4 years, I put in an Elizarov. Sorry.
Ruta, just one sec. Do you have a second device on in your play? Because there's a lot of disturbance coming through.
It's not from me actually. Even I'm.
So everyone else should mute themselves then.
Sir, done, sir. Please go ahead.
Everyone, please mute.
Please go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. So this is the Elizarov device I put in. I corrected the tibia and lengthened it. And I'm sorry, this is auto running. Okay. And you can see the complete correction. This is follow-up at the age of 5 years. He has developed little valgus in his knee. Then he came back at the age of 10 years. This is his X-ray. You can see there is a lot of rotational deformity. And he has 3 centimeters of shortening. But his foot is plantigrade and painless. It is stiff right from the beginning. And this is how he is walking. So at the age of 12 years, this is how his X-ray looks. Look at the rotational deformity in the tibia. So I did apply Ilizarov fixator. I did a derotation and I did lengthening. I lengthened by 4 centimeters. And this is his X-ray. So he came back at the age of 18 years. Full function of the knee, he can squat. His ankle is stiff, but he can manage to squat. And he's a tall guy. He developed again 3 centimeters of shortening. And he still has valgus in the knee. So this is his last surgery. I corrected his valgus in the femur. I corrected the rotational deformity also. And I lengthened his tibia, this time over a nail. And that's his latest X-ray actually. And you can see he can squat fully. Knee is fully, the full flexion is there. So I have 21 years follow-up of this case. I have published this procedure. So I do this super ankle in 2 stages. And I published this in JPO as original article. Thank you. If there are any questions, quickly I can take 1 or 2.
Great case, Ruta.
Thank you.
I think these are always difficult things to follow up for a long time because they always, and this valgus in the knee is a problem that really crops up very often when you're doing these patients. The only thing was, why did you do your correction at the distal femur rather than the proximal tibia?
Rather than the proximal tibia.
Yeah.
The valgus was in the distal femur. It wasn't there in proximal tibia. Actually, retrospectively, I think I should have corrected the distal femoral valgus by 8 plate when he was 5 years old. I had offered that, but they somehow refused, and I don't remember why it was not done. It was 15 years ago, but it was in distal femur. So that's why.
Because it looks like a little bit of a zigzag deformity at the end. That's
a golf club deformity now.
Yeah, that's what golf
club. No, actually, I have translated it. And there's no golf club.
If you look at the final X-ray, it looks a little bit. I mean, we are being overcritical, of course, but
okay.
With you, we have to be overcritical.
He had no problem. He had little ankle valgus actually because he has had little of ball and socket ankle. So there was ankle valgus. So you can see little varus in the distal femur correction, but the mechanical axis, final mechanical axis is aligned.
Dr. Ruta, can I ask you something? I've done a few of these lengthenings in the fibula, and in some of the cases, actually, while lengthening the tibia. Tibia. Sorry, I stand corrected. So in tibia, I have actually faced a problem of knee subluxation.
In fibular hemimelia?
Yes.
Okay.
Have you ever faced a similar problem? And do you go across to the knee in these cases actually?
I have never gone across the knee in fibular hemimelia. I've never actually encountered. Now I've published a series of 20 cases. So knee subluxation was never a problem.
Yeah. I've not had that problem.
I think I've seen a lot of cases. Even now I have a 3-4-year-old child with a complete anterior subluxation. That's very common. Especially when you do tibial lengthening, knee can become unstable. Probably some ligamentous issues.
If it's a PFFD, if it's a part of congenital short femur syndrome, then yes, then usually the knee subluxation is a big problem. But if it's an isolated fibular hemimelia without any problem in the femur, at least I have never encountered knee subluxation. But if it's a part of PFFD, then you have to be very, very careful.
Dr. Ruta, what I have observed in almost all of my cases is that it is almost always associated with PFFD, some degree. of PFFD. Some degree of congenital femoral shortening is there in almost all my cases.
Well, again, I differ. They can have distal femoral valgus, which is quite common. But
That is, I mean, very mild shortening, sometimes even 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters, but they do have shortening and some amount of distal femur valgus.
On the contrary, in few of my cases, there was compensatory lengthening of femur.
I agree with Gupta.
Yeah.
I've seen a few cases of that sort.
Yeah.
Femur shortening.
Interesting.
And in case, I mean, my feeling is that in some of these cases, if the gastrocnemius is tight, actually.
Yes, it is always tight, almost always
Yeah,
tight.
I mean, these are the cases which pulls the gastrocnemius, actually pulls the tibia posteriorly in some of these cases.
So maybe you should consider doing releases of the gastroc in these.
Of course,
of the
of course.
TA.
The first stage that I do is release of gastrocnemius.
Exactly. Oh, that's we have to do for that. Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
If there is knee instability, there is no harm in going across the knee, but I have never done it.
I've certainly had valgus. That's a common problem we
That
have.
is very common. Yeah.
In few cases, I have had a flexion deformity of the knee, and then I had to stop the lengthening at that point of time.
That is PFFD. That is part of
That's
that congenital
PFFD, I
short femur
think.
syndrome. Yes.
Okay, should
Okay.
almost 9:30.
Yes.
Ma'am,
I think we had really good
information.
discussion.
Rita ma'am,
Sorry, Shamsul? Sorry.
can I just show one slide for discussion and guidance I'm going to upload next week, similar to Ritesh? Just 1 minute, ma'am.
Okay.
One slide. Okay. Can you see this case?
Yeah.
This is the patient of around 4 years, had a trauma and infection 2 years back. This came with a similar case of radial club hand. I've planned this, as you can see in the figure. I planned removal of the sclerotic bone in this case and correction of this wrist deformity and lengthening and transport. Any guidance for this?
Can I add something?
Yes, sir.
Epiphysiodesis of the ulna.
I mean, I would go in for
Alternate, in fact.
shortening of the ulna.
Yeah.
And put in that same graft in the radius and fix both. And later on, consider lengthening if it is excessively short. That would be my viewpoint in this.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good suggestion. I agree.
That's an option I would think of. But only thing is, you may have much more of this radius, which is useless. So sometimes that gap may be quite a bit. So you need to think about that. Because this squiggle of a bone sometimes is really...
You can consider fibula in those cases.
Yeah, you can use fibula
Yeah, so,
also. Yeah.
so then you may have to excise this around here, excise a bit there, and then see the gap. If you can get that from the ulna, great. Otherwise, you may have to go for...
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can use the fibula, yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
great.
Okay, I think we'll end this session. Yeah.
Should.
We should wrap up now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am.
It was a great learning experience for all of us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Good night. Good night.
Thank you, ma'am. Good night, everyone.
Thanks and bye, everybody. Good to catch up
Thank you,
in
sir.
these
Thank you.
crazy times, but let's hope things settle down again.
Actually, last year we missed. We didn't have Asami meeting.
Yeah.
Yes. But this year there will be quite a few. So be prepared.
Well, you don't, it'll be all mostly online, I expect.
Yes, yes, unfortunately.
For 2 years, we will have tough time.
Yeah, good. Okay, great. Bye, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ridesh.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
Ritesh. Thank you,
Thank you.
Ritesh.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ritesh. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Ritesh.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, everyone.
Ravi, we must start for the next month now itself.
Yeah, sir, definitely.
Ritesh was telling you didn't inform it well in advance. He was having tough time.
Yeah, sir. So we should.
And find new faculties also.
Yeah, sure, sir. Sure, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Bye.